Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. What a big room. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dan Stoltz. I'm an IT Pro Evangelist for Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft for about almost 5 years. And today we're going to talk about top 10 things every systems admin needs to know about Windows Server 2008 R2 SP1. That's a mouthful. More importantly than that, this is a 300-level session. So my hope and expectation is that everyone here can learn something new, even though it's a fairly old operating system, old meaning been out on the market for a while. There's a lot of good stuff in here. So my hope and expectation is everybody gets to take something away. And with a little bit of luck, you'll get to take a lot away. You can reach me on Twitter at ITProGuru, my blog, itproguru.com, and email is itproguru@microsoft.com if you're interested in that. The first thing I want to do is kick things off with letting you know about a place where you can go to download a poster about Windows Server 2008 R2. Whenever you get it, it's a full-size poster if you print it, or you can just use it on the screen as a PDF and zoom in like I've done here. And it really gives you some good information about the operating system and the interconnectivity between the different components. And I have a few links for these. I'm not going to spend much time on them whenever they come up, just to let you know that they're there, and there's really a lot of information that you can get out of these posters. Okay, this is a countdown to what I consider the top 10 things. And I'm going to begin the countdown with just innovation with R2. Because R2 and even R2 SP1, there's been some pretty significant innovations over 2008. So I'm not going to go into each and every one of these. I've got the slides up here. By the way, this is a very demo-heavy session. I've got about 300 slides to go through. No, just kidding. I've got about 15 slides to go through, and we're going to do mostly demos. Okay. So a couple things. Boot to VHD is awesome. I use it all the time. Green IT, core parking, some of the big things. SP2, we'll talk about some of the things like remote FX and dynamic memory and stuff like that. So there's lots of stuff in terms of innovation with R2. The next thing I want to touch on is tools. There are a ton of tools out there for Server 2008 R2, and in particular things that are built into the operating system or add-ons for that operating system. Things like the recycle bin, ADC, which is your advanced search within Active Directory, service accounts, group policies, extras, BPA, the Business Practices Analyzer. Migration tools, I want to kind of pop into a web browser and kind of show you what that looks like. To go to aka.ms/tools, this is going to give you a list of how you can migrate from Server 2008 to 2008 R2. And if you drill down in there, you can actually see there's some pretty detailed instructions on how to do the migrations. And to pick a topic, it's actually going to give you very detailed information with step-by-step on how to do that. So some really good stuff. If you're migrating from an older operating system to 2008 R2, these are really awesome tools to get to know. And oh, by the way, the top 5 is where I'm going to spend most of my time today. So the first 5 we're going to go through fairly quickly. But the migration tools, you have Hyper-V, Branch Cache, File Services, Active Directory, Domain Name Services, Certification Authority, DHCP, IP configuration. Yes, IP configuration can even be migrated. Local users and groups, remote desktop services, and many other things in terms of tools. Let's jump to number 8, IPv6. IPv6 is one of those things that a lot of people tend to overlook. Right? Why? Well, because a few years ago, IPv6 was, oh, we got to get there because we're out of IP addresses. And then what happened? You know, everybody started using NAT, and the IP address problem wasn't that big of a problem that we thought it was going to be. But there's some really significant advantages to IPv6, and IPv6 is on by default in Windows Server 2008 R2. So it's really giving us a starting point to be able to start utilizing these technologies. And this technology gives us literally 1 million IPs per person on the planet. So it's just an enormous amount of IP addresses. And as we move into cloud and cloud services, what you're going to see is individual services and applications are going to be using many IP addresses. So we're going to need a lot of IP addresses as everybody embraces the cloud. But direct access is one of the key things that are enabled by IPv6, which gives you an always-on connection to your corporate network. So think of it as the VPN that you never have to go click on a button to connect to the VPN. It's just always connected. If you think about the implications of that kind of behind the scenes, you as an administrator always have access to that remote machine as long as it's on the internet. So it's not just for the sake of the user, it's also for the sake of us, the IT administrators, that gives us that access to that box all the time. I know many years ago, I think back at several years ago, where I was working at an organization where they had an annual sales meeting, and the only time that I could get my fingers on their machine was whenever they came in for that annual sales meeting. And you know what? They were in town for 2 days, and they were in conferences all day, and guess what? A lot of times they needed their laptop while they were in that conference. So some of these things are just completely eliminated in terms of PC access by direct access. But I want to spend a little bit more time on this because there's some fundamental changes that brings to us as administrators, and also us as business, and us in terms of our personal lives. So let me give you some examples. Let's say that you're automotive insurance adjuster, right? Where somebody has a crash, you go out and take the pictures and log into the system. What this user is going to be able to get, or what the cost is going to be to repair the car. Well, with IPv6 and the technology that's out there today, that's ready to go today, the adjuster can take his camera out there, take the pictures, automatically synchronize with SkyDrive, or in this case, automatically sync with their homegrown application that posts it right up to the cloud service where all their information goes. He's typing up information on his computer that automatically gets synchronized. Literally, by the time he walks away from that car, maybe it's a 5 or 10, 15-minute inspection. 15 minutes into that inspection, he's got all the information up there. What does that mean for the business? Well, for the insurance company, that means they can turn around that what used to take weeks can now take minutes. So IPv6 enables that. So let's look at it from a personal standpoint. What does that mean to us? And as IPv6 becomes more prevalent in the industry. Think about this. You're out on vacation taking pictures with your family. You're out at Disneyland. You're taking pictures of the kids with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and with the castle in the background, right at Disney World. And your camera, as soon as you connect to the internet with IPv6, you have the capability when wireless is going to be everywhere in short order. You guys know that, right? Wireless is really in the U.S. and overseas. It's already in a lot of places everywhere, but that can automatically synchronize with your SkyDrive. Maybe Grandma at home has a photo, electronic photo thing on her coffee table, and she has that synchronizing with your SkyDrive. So literally, 5 minutes after you take the picture, she's looking at the picture on her end table. So some really cool features are enabled by some of these technologies. Yes, I know you got to really be careful what you actually automatically synchronize that you're taking pictures of, but you get the picture. So the number 7, or the next thing we're going to talk about, is IS Smooth Streaming. A couple things that I want to point out about IS Smooth Streaming. First of all, in the Olympics, the last Olympic Games, the 2010 Olympic Games, that's what was used to stream all of those events, literally thousands of events. Let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at IS. Now, a couple things that I want to point out here. I'm on the IIS.net, and I'm going to go to the Smooth Streaming, and I'm going to go ahead and just play this video. And I want to point out a couple of things whenever I do this. One, on the upper left-hand corner here, you can see the frame rate, 23 frames per second, 24, 25. So it has the capability of auto-adjusting the frame rate based on the bandwidth that I have available to me right now. And you see the meter down here scaling as to what I'm capable of with my current bandwidth. So I also have a slider bar that I can set the maximum bit rate. So I can say, I only want you to stream it at half of that. And I'm going to go ahead and just zoom ahead so you know it's not cached, and see what's actually happening. So instead of having a long queuing and buffering time, it can actually give you that nice image. Yes, it's not quite so clear, but you have that nice image and you don't have that constant buffering issue that you would have without this, this technology. So some really, really cool stuff. But if you do have the bandwidth, then slide that bar all the way up, and let's jump ahead again. And you'll see that it automatically adjusts based on, so right now I have more bandwidth, it's automatically adjusting and giving me a higher resolution of my video. So some really cool stuff, and especially in this world of video being overwhelming all of our infrastructures in terms of we're watching videos and the customers are watching videos, and obviously sites like YouTube, very, very popular sites. And just to take it back down a notch, I'm gonna jump ahead again, and just to show you what it's like going back the other way. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump ahead here, and again, no glitches at all. I'm at a slower speed. It's automatically going to recognize that and adjust the video for me. So some good stuff there. All right, the next thing that I want to point out is the Winter Games, the Olympic Games of 2010. And I'm just going to pop into the video here. I'm in full screen mode. Right? This is what they used for, and you know how many events are going on at one time. There's dozens of events going on at one time. All of the Olympics were streamed live using IS. So it's ready for production, ready for the big time. Now, obviously, the resolution on this is designed for the smaller scale. Then when I blow it up, it's a little bit pixelated because of the resolution that it was recorded at. Okay? And they did that from a performance or from a download standpoint, knowing that thousands or potentially millions of people are going to be downloading that at once to limit their own bandwidth. Okay, so let's go ahead and get out of that. And the next thing that I want to point out is a website, is.net, and I'm actually on the overview tab. So www.is.net. And you can see that there's some really good information out here online about IIS if you want to give it a closer look. But that made my top 10, and I think there's some good stuff out there if you want to dig a little bit deeper on that. The other thing that I'll mention about IIS is PHP support. In the past, how many people run PHP applications or rely on PHP? Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that the hands are that low. But PHP is now a first-class citizen, in IIS with Server 2008 R2. And you can do some pretty amazing things with the integration. Not only that, but there's an agreement between Microsoft and PHP to keep that rev going. So as IIS gets updated, the PHP stuff will get upgraded as well, and they'll be in sync with their development cycle. So some really cool stuff with like the fast CGI and its ability to really leverage the greatest features of PHP as well as some of the best features of IIS. Now, while I'm in the browser, I want to mention a couple things. One, the slide decks and the PowerShell scripts and the stuff that I'm going to be talking to you about today are available on my blog, itproguru.com. You might want to make a note of that. And I do have a slide at the very end also in case you in case you want to refer back to it. But I do have a post up there as of this morning. I put a post up there that has the PowerPoints as well as the scripts that I'm going to be doing. Although the MMS site is going to have the PowerPoints up, I think they said tomorrow that they should be up for today's sessions. But I do have all of the stuff that I used, including the PowerShell scripts, embedded in the presentation. So if you download the presentation, you'll also get a copy of those scripts. It kind of stinks if you go back and look at this stuff 6 months later and you realize, well, where's the script? A couple other things while I'm in here. I want to just do a PowerShell search on my blog to point out a couple of other things while I'm here. And there's a lot of stuff out here on PowerShell in particular. And I would encourage you to go out there and take a look at that if you're interested in PowerShell, which is coming up in a minute. All right, so let me pop back into the presentation. And not sure how I lost my place. We were on IIS. Okay. And oh, by the way, all the websites that I have that I've gone to, I've zipped them up and put them into this file that's on the IIS streaming site. So you didn't have to scramble to take notes real quick about where that is. You have access to all of that stuff. All right, number 6 on the list as we count down is Server Core. How many people are using Server Core now? Okay. Probably a little more than I expected, but that's good. Server Core is great for read-only domain controllers. All of the key roles are supported. And one thing that I wanted to point out about this is it's easier to administer. Well, what does that mean, easier to administer? Well, easier than 2008, right? You do have full PowerShell capability, and that was always the case. But now there's this sconfig.cmd file. So if you just type sconfig from the command prompt, it brings up a window. So some really cool stuff in there because it allows you to do things like, attach to the domain to the, or change the work group, change the computer name, add a local administrator, configure remote management, a lot of those things. So they've given you that quick menu to be able to do those simple tasks that you need to do on a server, on a console, to make it a little less scary and a little easier. And on my blog, itproguru.com, if you do the tags on the lower right-hand corner, there's like a how-to or there's video tags. I've got some videos and some how-tos up there on how to configure Server Core if you're interested in that. Wow, I can take a breath. It's been 15 minutes and we've gone through the top 5. That means the top 5 get most of the time today as I expected. Now, I do want to encourage questions. If you have questions, I do ask that you please come to the microphone, and in case I don't see you because the lights are blaring at me, wave at me or something, and I'll be happy to take your questions. I also have plenty of time at the end of this session to cover some Q&A as well. Okay? So let's dig into the top 5. Well, top 5. Number 5, coming in at number 5 is PowerShell. A couple things that I want to point out about PowerShell. There is an integrated scripting environment, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. You can install features. You can enable roles. You can do really, anything from inside of PowerShell. So I would encourage you to pop into the integrated scripting environment and play with it a little bit, because as you get more familiar with it, you'll find out how you can. You'll understand how you can use that to leverage the things that you have to do on a repeated basis or on a regular basis. Whenever you're getting involved, for those that are, how many people are using PowerShell regularly now? Wow, outstanding. For those that did not raise their hand, Bing is your friend. Okay, pretty much anything you want to know how to do with PowerShell, Bing will get you there. Yeah, Bing's competitors will probably get you there too. But there's thousands of commands. Go fishing. Getting help, learning how to fish, get-services, get services-examples, get help. We're going to show you those commands. Application root namespace. There's a lot of different namespaces. I'm going to show you the virtualization in just a moment. But different applications, different types of systems, whether it be AD. AD is an example. So, or the file system. You can navigate through the file system. You can navigate through AD just like it were a file system, with changing the directory and stuff like that. So some really, really cool stuff within PowerShell if you get used to it. And then remoting. We're going to go into a lot more detail in remoting in just a minute. I do want to highlight on the lower right-hand corner here the PowerShell integrated scripting environment. Actually, let me go ahead and pull up the demo, and we'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so if I'm gonna go into my server manager, and I'm going to go to roles, and then add roles. And my machine is a little busy right now. You'll understand whenever we get later on in the demos, you'll understand why my machine is a little busy. So we've got, sorry, it's not a role, it's a feature. My apologies. So we want to add a feature. And I've already got it added on this server, so it's going to be grayed out for me, but I'm going to just show you where to turn that on. So if we scroll down a bit, PowerShell integrated scripting environment. If you turn this on, then you gain access to those features. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. And let's pull up a couple things and see what we've got. So what does the integrated scripting environment look like? I'm just going to type ISE for integrated scripting environment. It's going to bring up a shortcut to it. Whenever I launch it, it's automatically going to launch in administrative mode. One of these days. Okay, so I'm in the integrated scripting environment now. It's remembered my settings from the last time I set it up. When you first go into it the first time, it's going to look like this. And I like to put my PowerShell script, and I'm actually going to open up a PowerShell script for what I'm going to do in this presentation. So I have that saved on my desktop. And again, you have this on the PowerPoint when you download it, or you can get the PowerShell script that I'm going to pull up from my blog. And I have it as a text file. And in the one that's zipped up, I also have it as a TXT file, just to avoid issues with your system not wanting to open it or anything. All right. So the first thing that I want to do is kind of show you a few things, like get help. Get-help. This is really going to be where to get started. So it's going to give you the syntax of how to run PowerShell commands. Get command shows you the different commands that are available, as an example, on this particular machine that I'm on. And you'll see that there's a ton of them. And some of those things are aliases, which are just shortcuts for different things. Okay? And get service, get-service. Is going to show me all services that are on this machine and their status, whether they're running, stopped, whatever. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to add a parameter to that. So I'm going to do get-service, WMI star, and it's going to show me all of the services that have WMI in the name or in the display name. And you can see that I do have this, and the current status is stopped. So if I get-help and then get service, it's going to get help on that command, get service. And I'm going to use a switch example. And the examples, like in this case, it's going to show me like 10 or 11 examples. And this is really cool because it gives you examples, including the actual syntax to actually type those commands in. In fact, you see the one that I showed you a minute ago is actually right in the help for the get service WMI star. All right, so we're gonna dive in a little bit deeper on this next one, and I'm actually gonna during this presentation I'm gonna talk. Remember, we're on number 5, which is PowerShell, but number 4 is remote management. So while I'm in PowerShell mode, I'm going to cover both 5 PowerShell and 4, which is remote management. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to show you what remote management is. This enable-ps remoting gives you the capability of remote controlling a machine that's on the network, and so I can do the enable-ps remoting. And whenever I do that, it asks me, some questions. It's letting me know that it's going to start the WinRM service. It's letting me know that it's going to open up a port on the firewall for remote management. It's going to enable that exception and stuff like that. So do I want to do that? I'm going to say A for yes to all. So A to yes for all. And literally it is that easy to enable PS remoting. Now, I've got some blog posts on enable PS remoting. So probably if you search on PowerShell or PS remoting, you'll get that pretty easy. I strongly recommend that all of you do this for all of your servers, not just your 2008 R2. I remember a scenario where we had a customer that had a 2003 terminal server, and whenever a user logged into the terminal, they got infected, they got infested with something, and whenever a user logged in to the terminal server session, it basically locked up the server. You couldn't ping it, you couldn't do anything to it. Whatever it was doing, it just locked it up. You couldn't do anything on the console, it was frozen. The only way to get it unfrozen is to reboot, and then you're at the, whenever you're at the login screen, it's okay, you can still do stuff. By having PowerShell installed on 2003, yes, 2003 supports it, it's just a download, it doesn't come with the operating system. By installing PowerShell on there and enable PS remoting, you can then manage that machine remotely using PowerShell. So some really cool tools, really cool capabilities available to you. So now that I've enabled PS remoting on this server, I can go into I'm on my host now. I'm just going to type in host name. I'm going to type in host name just to show you where I'm at now, or what my reference is now. So my host name is R2 host, which is the machine that I'm on. So if I go into properties of this machine, and we'll give that a minute to come up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and enter P session. I'm going to do enter P session. Looks like it came up. Let me pop in there real quick. So my computer name is host, R2 host, in the woodgrovebank.com domain. A note while I'm here, I've got 16 gigabytes of memory in this machine, and it is running Server 2008 R2 Enterprise with Service Pack 1. I wanted to point that out because later on when we do more demos, I want that to be clear and obvious. Okay, so now I want to do enter PS session, the name of the computer that I want to remote control or remote manage, okay, and the credentials if I wanted to pass that. If I wanted to pass the password, I could do that. In my case, I want to not pass the password, so it's going to prompt me for the password. And I'm going to type in my super duper password. Now, what you'll see is, from a command prompt standpoint, it actually logs me into the remote computer. On the computer, you won't notice anything, but see up here, I have my I have the DC, which is the name of the computer that I logged into. That's what my reference is. And in fact, if I typed in host name from here, you'll see that it's as if I'm sitting on that machine doing PowerShell commands. Okay, and if I do who am I, it will show me that I'm logged in as Woodgrove Bank Administrator, which is the user that I passed it for the credentials whenever I did the remote session. Now, whenever you're done, doing whatever it is you wanted to do, like get service, you see why I copy and paste mostly. It's actually getting the services of that remote computer of the DC. Okay, so I'm going to do a clear screen and exit PS session. Exit PS session, whenever you're done, will take you out of remote administration session and take you back to your local machine. So if I do host name, host name, you'll see that I'm R2 host again. Okay? Now, you can also, if you've enabled PS remoting, you can also disable PS remoting by just running the disable-PS remoting on that computer that you enabled it on. If you actually wanted to close that port and disable remote management, stuff like that, you could do that. The next thing that I want to talk about in terms of PowerShell is I want to talk about this namespace. What's this root virtualization namespace? You'll see get wmyObject namespace root/virtualization, and it's in the computer system class, and I'm just doing a get member here. So let me bail out of that, run that, and you'll see that this is what that namespace looks like. So there's some pretty cool stuff in here: request state change, set power state, enable state, health state, and all kinds of different stuff. So you can do some really cool stuff in here. So let me give you an example of one thing that you can do with the different things in this particular namespace. So I've got a script here, and I'm going to do a CLS again just to clear my screen. And I'm going to copy and paste this little script that I have written. And this script is just going to go through that namespace, my computer virtualization namespace. It's going to do a query of the computer of the MSVM, so the Microsoft Virtual Machine computer system, and it's going to give me the following information. Now, this is kind of long because I'm actually converting a number to a a real name that you can understand. That's what most of this code is doing. It's not a real complicated script. And oh, by the way, like most scripts out there, you don't have to write this. It's already written and it's already on the internet. So you can just go snag it anytime you want. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And let's see what that looks like. So if I scroll up here, this is the output for that command. So you see at the top, that's the actual command that ran, and this is what it ran. You'll see that I have a lot of machines on my current Hyper-V host. More about that in a little bit. So I also want to show you that you can do more than just look at stuff. You can actually change stuff. So for this next command, I'm going to do a couple things. Okay, I have a script here, and in my slides, there's a hidden slide that steps through each one of the things that I'm doing on this. But actually, you know what? Let me CLS again, and I'm going to paste in that command so you can kind of see it color-coded. It's a little bit easier to read. So the first thing that I'm doing, I've got a couple of comments here. So what I've got is I've got a machine called server core, and I've got a variable here. That's the machine that I want to work with, and I'm going to give it a new name, and this is going to be the new name. So I've just put those into variables. And this script is really just to show you some of the things that you can do to actually make changes versus just looking stuff up in PowerShell. It's going to use the query to get my VMs from the namespace, and then it's going to actually go ahead and set the data. So whenever it's setting the data to the new VM name. So let's go into my Hyper-V Manager and look, see if we can find that machine that's called server core. Now, right now, that server is off, but if it were on, this command would work just as well. It doesn't have to be off in order for this command to work. So whenever I execute this command, let me try that again. I hate it when a demo doesn't work. Don't you hate it when a demo doesn't work? Ah, you're right. I have a note in there. I need to remark that first line. Thank you. Who said that? Make sure you come up and see me after. I got a present for you. Okay. Thanks for your keen eye on that. You're right. That first line should be a comment. So let's try that again. And I'm going to go ahead and run that again. It's already done the update. I'm not sure what that error is, but it's already done the update, so I'm going to go take a look at it. And it did actually change the server name. Nope. Yeah, that's the server core. So that was the one that was called server core, and it did change the name on that. Okay, so other things that you can do, and I'm not going to run this one, but like I have add Windows feature, Hyper-V. So a simple one-liner. This is the same as going into Server Manager, going into roles. Actually, it's called a role, but you're enabling a feature because it's an add Windows feature commandlet that you're enabling the Hyper-V role. So that one command will go ahead and do that, enable the role. So there's lots of things that you can do with PowerShell. I would encourage you to go fishing. Okay, let me switch machines again. And remote management. So I have the Enable PS remoting. I have a very detailed blog with a step-by-step on how to make all that magic work. Again, that's on my blog. But you got the session information, or the information on the Enter-P session through the PowerShell demo. So that brings us to number 4, remote management. But remote management is a lot more than just PowerShell. Because Server Manager, as an example, Server Manager, you can add multiple machines. Whoops. You can add multiple machines. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner here that I have multiple machines listed in Hyper-V Manager. So let me switch back over for a second. So in Server Manager, if you right-click on Hyper-V Manager, and you can do Connect to Server, and you can list any number of different servers in here. So just go to another computer, put in the computer name, and boom, as long as you have remote management enabled, then you can actually manage that from any Hyper-V machine. So it begs the question, a lot of people will ask me, well, if you can do that, if you can truly manage multiple machines from in Hyper-V Manager, well, then what's the difference between Hyper-V Manager and a tool like System Center Virtual Machine Manager, right? How many people are using System Center Virtual Machine Manager, right? Awesome, awesome, awesome tool. Well, the answer to that is Hyper-V Manager can work on one machine at a time. You're connecting to multiple machines and you're remotely managing them, but you can only do tasks that touch one machine at a time. So a task that you cannot do with just Hyper-V Manager would be a task that you can do with System Center Virtual Machine Manager, like moving storage. You know, moving storage from one Hyper-V host to another Hyper-V host for a virtual machine, doing a migration, live migration or otherwise. So things where you have to touch two hosts, that's where you have to have System Center Virtual Machine Manager. But the core functionality is available within Hyper-V. So back to remote management. And it does take a minute for these to switch. So that brings us to System Center Virtual Machine Manager. You guys know, I mean, you're here, you're at MMS. System Center Virtual Machine Manager is an awesome tool. This is actually a picture of the I guess the current shipping product. It's the, how many people noticed that they got a USB key in their bag? So that means everybody else just got a tip that you didn't know, right? I think it's a 16 gig key that's got all the System Center bits on it. So really, really cool, and it's got a System Center logo on it. So some of you got a tip out of that anyway. And then there's obviously PowerShell and a whole lot more. But one of the whole lot more things that you may not be aware of is if you go to aka.ms/win7 remote, you can, on your Windows 7 machine, you can run your management tools. So like on your desktop, it does have to be, I think, Enterprise or Ultimate in order to run the tools. And oh, by the way, it does not work on Windows Server 2008 R2, so you can't remotely manage, or you can't run these tools to remotely manage from the server. You have to do it from the desktop. But then that gives you the capability of doing, like, managing your group policy, managing your Active Directory, managing your DNS, managing your Hyper-V, managing all of that stuff from those remote administration tools. So let me show you what that looks like. We go back to our web browser, remotely manage Windows, and that will take you to this blog post that I have on my blog, and you'll see the instructions on how to actually install it, what to run, and step by step on how to actually install those tools on your Windows 7 box. So some really cool stuff on that in terms of managing your local systems. So remote server administration tools for Windows 7 with SP. It does have to have SP1 also, okay? And you can go to the download center to actually download the bits. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on this one, because this is a big one. How many people are running remote desktop services in their organization? Okay, how many people know what terminal services is? Right? Remote, for those few, just to get you up to speed quickly before we dive into the deeper stuff with remote desktop services, I want to just quickly tell you that remote desktop services has, that new name, what used to be called terminal services in Windows, in prior versions of Windows. With Windows 2008, it changed to remote desktop services. And the reason for the name change was actually because it does a whole lot more than just terminal services, right? So they really had to change the name. So it's a lot better than terminal services. You have a very easy configuration, very easy management, amazing user experience. Amazing user experience. This is one of the things that really puts Microsoft above the competition in terms of the amazing user experience. However, I will tell you, you get that high fidelity desktop and the bidirectional audio and the fluid video playback. So that means if I would have been playing that video on a remote session, I would have saw that video just the way I showed it on my local machine. There's some hardware, implications though. To use that high fidelity stuff or to get the real power out of that, you do need to have a graphics processing on the local server. So, and those cards can be rather expensive. So it's definitely something you want to look at before just going and saying I want to enable it for everybody. But it does DirectX 10.1 3D applications and Aero Glass multi-monitor support. This is awesome. I can have at my local desktop, I could be 1,000 miles away from my server that I'm remote controlling into, or my VDI workstation that I'm remote controlling into. And if I have multi-monitors on my local desktop, I can actually display horizontally across that and see and use that on multiple screens instead of being limited to just that one screen. So some really cool stuff that does have to be set up or configured by the administrator. So you have to allow that to happen. And the main reason for that because there is some bandwidth concerns with that. In order to do that, and also there's the GPU support on the local server. USB peripherals, this was a big ask of everybody, and now having USB peripheral access on terminal service as well as our VDI is there and it's available. So a lot more information on Remote FX if you go to this bit.ly, HWMC67. And Bitly's, I believe, are case sensitive. So again, you just grab the deck off my blog and just follow the link on that. I have another poster on remote desktop services as well, and that is bit.ly/2008 R2 RDS poster, and there's a link for that. Again, Bitly's are case sensitive. And it goes into quite a lot of detail, as you can see with pretty graphics and pictures. You can really learn a lot about this stuff by studying these pictures on these posters. So it's a really, really cool tool to get you up to speed on what's going on and all the different components. So session versus VDI. How many people have deployed VDI or are thinking about deploying VDI? Yeah, usually it's a small number, and if I said just deployed, it'd be a much smaller number. There's been a lot of buzz about VDI, and there's been a lot of confusion about VDI too. So in my top 10, I wanted to make sure that I cleared some of that up. All right. So what are the difference? Why would I use VDI over session-based computing, and why would I use session-based computing over VDI? Well, let me kind of draw a picture in your mind to get you to understand the issue, because I think if you understand the underlying issues, it'll make it a lot easier to kind of figure out for yourself how big you should go with your VDI implementation. So if you think about what's happening, as just a refresher, whenever you're running terminal services or session-based computing, you basically have a server running Windows Server 2008 R2 or R2 SP1, and users are remote controlling into that server. The operating system that they're presented in the remote desktop session is Windows Server. In VDI, that's not the case. In VDI, you've got Windows Server 2008 R2 SP1 running as the host. That's actually your Hyper-V server that's running the VMs that are your workstation. But your workstation itself is a VM running on that server, and that's running Windows 7. Okay, how much memory does it take to run Windows 7? I throw that out there, and I'm going to get a whole bunch of answers, so I'm not going to wait for you guys to yell it out. Anywhere from 1 to 8 gig, right? If you've got some power users, they're doing a lot of stuff, they probably have a lot more memory. Now, the memory that you'll need on your VDI system is probably pretty equivalent to whatever that user would need on their local workstation, because it is just another workstation. So what are some of the advantages that they get out of that? Well, they don't have to have all that power at the end at their workstation, so they can use an inexpensive device to connect and get good performance out of it, because all the heavy-duty lifting is on the server. However, something to keep in mind is for all that high-tech graphics, it does leverage the CPU card on the server, but you also, it also makes that stream, whenever you enable that, it makes that stream a lot heavier. So make sure that you have good bandwidth for that. So, but session computer versus VDI, there's no difference from a connectivity standpoint, right? There's really no difference. This is where the difference comes in. Let's say I have a piece of hardware, say it's a Dell R710 or whatever, and I've got 64 gig of memory, and I want to keep it kind of simple. And I've got, so really the question is, how many users could I get on that type of a machine, right? If I'm running VDI, if I'm running terminal services, I think the white papers on that say you need about 256 meg per user plus a little bit extra based on the application that they're running or whatever. So based on that math, I could probably fairly easily on that box get 75, 100, 200 if they're not doing very much, if they're running, line of business applications that are, web-based or they're not running, all of the heavy duty lifting like your SQL queries and stuff are actually being executed on a server that it's connected to and stuff like that. So if they're running, little stuff on the local machine, I can get by with, I could get as much as 200 or even 250 users on that one server. But what happens whenever you do, so from a scalability point, what happens whenever you flip that over and say, okay, how many on that same server, how many VDI sessions could I get on there? How many VDI computers can I get on there? Well, to answer that question, you got to say, well, how much memory do I need? It's a lot more than memory, so give me a minute. How much memory do I have to have on each of those Windows 7 in order for Windows 7 to run efficiently, right? Well, let's say we're going to use a benchmark of 2 gig, and 2 gig is, for most users, is probably going to be sufficient. Bearing in mind, you've got a faster front side bus, you've probably got 15,000 RPM drives running on, maybe a RAID 5 or a RAID 10 configuration. So you've got a blazing server, but it's working pretty hard too. So there's a couple of considerations there in both sides. But here's the big thing, though. So you've got Windows 7. How many Windows 7 machines can you run on that same 64 gig of memory? Recognizing you got to leave a gig or two for the operating system for the server, right? So how many machines can you do? 30? Maybe? No? That's if they're 1 gig, right? No, that's if they're 2 gig. They're about 30 machines, because you got to leave a little bit for the operating system. So 30 versus 200. From a density or scalability standpoint, huge difference. But that's not the big problem. That's not the biggest problem with VDI. The biggest problem with VDI is you've got all those bits of Windows Server running, and you've got all of those bits of Windows Server running on the hard drive too. So your disk I/O goes through the roof, versus over here in session-based computing, you've got one OS, Windows Server 2008 R2. One OS in memory, one OS reading and writing from disk. You don't have that much disk I/O versus VDI. VDI kills your disk I/O. So performance, memory, disk I/O, and processor, of course. In addition to having those extra machines and all the services and all the things that have to happen in the background, all those take CPU cycles. So it does a lot more in VDI. Also, your cost of the software, cost of the hardware. You got to configure those. You got to consider those things. User rights, flexibility, app compat. So VDI is going to give you some big advantage in terms of flexibility and user rights, because one of the reasons why you would want to use VDI is, let's say you have, the CFO that says, I don't want to be on a shared server, right? Because I want to make sure nobody can see my stuff. And you tell him, well, look, I can lock everything down with group policy and security, and there's no way anybody can get to it. You're fine. Nah, not good enough for him. You guys know the ones I'm talking about, right? You've talked to them. A lot of you have. So they're a really good candidate because they want to have control over their environment, and they want to make sure nobody else can get in there. Another example might be is if you've got a user that has an application, and that application has to run with administrative privileges. Now, you're not going to put any user with administrative privileges on your terminal services or your session-based computing server. You're just not, because you know what, if you do, the first thing they're going to do is whenever they get ready, they're going to log in, they're going to work for the day, they're going to get ready to go home, and they're going to shut down their computer, right? Who knows they're going to do that, right? First thing they're going to do, at the end of the day, the last thing they're going to do is start, shut down. I don't know what this box is, I'll just type something in there, I don't know, and then say, okay. And they've just shut down your terminal server. Not a good idea. So you never want to have users have administrative rights. We know that. But if their application requires them to have administrative rights, great candidate for VDI. Okay? VDI does offer some benefits, but strictly from a cost standpoint, session-based computing is much, much, much better. RDSH stands for Remote Desktop Session Host. Has about 5 times the scalability over VDI. So it's really a key consideration that you want to think about whenever you're deciding on whether or not you're going to do session-based computing or VDI. And again, both of these technologies are enabled by Windows Server 2008 R2, and they're made better by Service Pack 1. So as we count down, wow, big one, right? We're down to number 2, Hyper-V. Some of the things you have now, live migration. This was a big one that you guys asked for, you know, a real big one. Quick storage migration. Let me tell you about quick storage migration. Quick storage migration, I did some benchmark testing on a production machine that I needed to migrate. I was on a Dell R710, I think, and I was moving from local disks to another Dell 710 that I was using direct attached storage, local disks. Okay, and the machine was running some applications, and I think the drive on it was I'm thinking 9 gig. So it was fairly small, but 9 gig, that's a lot to copy across the wire. So quick storage migration, what that actually does, you can't do it with Hyper-V Manager. This leverages other tools like System Center Virtual Machine Manager. What it actually does is it does a save state. Not a save state, but a snapshot, if you will, where it creates a differencing disk, right? So any changes that are written to disk from the time that you started that process, any changes that are made, it writes it to that differencing disk, and it locks the primary disk on that server, so no changes can be written to it, right? Now, it can copy that entire VHD over to the new location. While the machine is running, it's copying all that data. It uses bits for the background transfer, so you're not clogging your network, and of course you can configure how all that works. You can even configure what network you want that transfer to happen on, if you have multiple networks and stuff like that. But then once it's done moving that big part of the VHD, or that data part of the VHD, then it pauses the machine, transfers the state, which is your memory, your saved memory, and the delta, or the differencing disk that it created. It merges those changes, unpauses, and then unpauses the machine in the new unpauses the machine in the new location. So you're doing that storage migration, you're moving it to another location. And by doing that, the server was down, the copy took about an hour to copy that 9 gig, but the server was up during that copy. And then when it actually paused the machine, it was down for less than 30 seconds. Okay? That's quick storage migration. I know VMware has live storage migration if you have all their bells and whistles and you've paid the 10 grand or whatever it is for their vCenter and you have those tools, great. Windows 8 will support that as well. So I'm pretty excited about some of the things that are coming up with that. And hot add storage is another thing. Hot add storage was introduced with Server 2008 as well. And I'm going to switch over to demo mode again. So I'm going to switch machines, and I'm going to kind of show you an example of what storage migration looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and log into a machine that I have here. I'm going to do a DC. And the main reason why I'm doing a DC, oh, look at that, I'm already in there. Okay, so the main reason I'm doing a DC is really just to show you that you can, right? So you don't have to be, you're not limited to just, a server that's not doing anything. All right, so I'm going to go into my computer, and I'm going to go to Manage. And I'm going to go to Storage. And I'm going to go to Disk Management. What I want to do is I want to show you that there's no bells and whistles. I mean, I'm not smoke and mirrors. I'm not trying to trick you with anything. So on this machine, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and just open up my computer as well. And you'll see that I only have one drive. So now I'm going to go into my Hyper-V Manager. I'm going to go into my settings on my DC. And I have a SCSI controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to the hard drive and I'm going to add. And what I want to do is I want to just show you that I can create a new drive and attach that while that machine is up and running without any hiccups. So I'm going to make it a dynamically expanding. I'm going to go to Next. I don't really care where I store it, but generally you're going to store it in a particular place. I can copy a physical drive if I wanted to, but in my case I just want to create a blank drive. Next, and Finish. And it's going to go ahead and attach that drive, and I'm going to apply. Okay, so if I pop back into my machine now, I still don't see it in my computer because all I've done is I've attached a machine, I've attached a hard drive that's not yet been formatted. Okay, first thing I need to do is right-click, bring it online. Right-click, initialize. It's going to create your master boot record. And then I can give it a partition. I'm going to just go ahead and give it the full size of the drive, give it a drive letter, and I'm just going to call this new data. And Finish. It's going to format, and while the machine was up and running, no issues, I can add that drive. And whenever this is done formatting, I can go ahead and explore that drive, write data to it, and all is well. File, new, text document, test, MMS. And sure enough, everything works fine. It's a real disk that I can write to. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I can actually remove that as well, so you can do hot remove. Now, one thing about this hot add and remove is that you do have to do it on a SCSI controller. So I'm going to right-click, take the disk offline, and now that the disk is offline, it's no longer being used by the operating system, so I can go into Hyper-V Manager, go into my settings again, and I can remove that drive. Okay? So by doing that, whenever I go back into the machine, you'll see that drive is actually gone. So very, very quickly you can do that. And oh, by the way, whenever I created that disk before I formatted it, 256 meg, that's how small that file was. And dynamic disk, as you add data to it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the whole point of the dynamic disk. It's great. It's a great solution for making sure your backups don't grow too big or your storage take more space than they need. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do while I'm in demo mode is I want to show you a little bit more about my machine. So I'm going to go into Properties. Sorry, I'm going to go into my Task Manager, which I already have running. And I'm going to show you that my machine is working pretty hard. I showed you earlier I got 16 gig of memory, and I'm using 15.7 gig of it, right? So while I'm doing that, one of the other features that I did want to show you is that I can actually start additional machines while I'm out of memory. So I'm going to start that one, and it's going to go ahead and restore it from a safe state. Now, if I pop back into my... see what happened? The first thing I did is I got a little dip in my memory because Hyper-V needed to grab more memory because it didn't have enough memory to start that machine. So it rearranged memory a little bit, and it gave me additional memory to start that. Okay, but you know what? I'm not done there. Let's try to start a couple more. So I'm going to start this one, and this one needs 2 gig of memory. Okay? It needs a minimum of 2 gig of memory to start up. So you see what it did. The first thing it does, Hyper-V goes out and tries to snag 2 gig of memory that it can give that machine, and then it starts firing that machine up. So this is your dynamic memory, okay? And let me just show you what that looks like whenever you're configuring it. So I'm going to go to this machine, and I'm going to go to Settings. And then I'm going to go to Dynamic, to my memory, and show you what the difference is. Now, before R2 SP1, before SP1, your only option was static. Static is the minimum amount of memory that this machine will use, or this machine needs. In other words, this machine will not start if it does not have available at least your static amount of memory. And in your startup RAM, that's the same number. And in fact, static, it's only that. It can't go lower, it can't go higher. In startup RAM or in dynamic mode, the startup means it can't go lower. It has to have at least that. It will always have at least that, or it will not start. And then your maximum can be whatever. Now, with your maximum, you want to be careful with this on your Exchange servers and your SQL servers because you know they'll take as much memory as you give them. So there's some other things that you probably need to know about this. And then you have a memory buffer that says, you know what, if I'm going to be swapping memory or changing memory all the time, how much of a buffer do I want to have before I go, pay the cost of reprocessing or recalculating that? And then I have a memory weight scale that says how much weight do I want to give this virtual machine relative or compared to other virtual machines running on this same box? And by setting those up, you'll see my memory status, my memory demand. Well, first of all, you have a memory demand, which tells you how much memory this server is actually using or needs. And then you have an assigned memory, or how much memory that is actually assigned. Okay? And in the status, you'll see that like this one is low. That means it does not have as much memory as it needs. Actually, the memory demand is exactly what it has. And in this case, the memory demand is only 378, but I'm giving it a full gig. And this one, I'm in a warning state because my memory demand is higher than my assigned memory. And again, these are how much memory is actually defined is determined by the weight on this machine. Now, the reason this is all working is because I've got this machine down here that the memory demand is 6 gig. I'm sorry, the memory demand is 8 gig, and it's currently only got 6 gig. So right now, what's happening is I wanted to point all this out is Hyper-V is configured and dynamic memory is configured not to page on the host. Well, you know what happens if you run out of memory, right? It's going to page. Whenever it pages, that means it's going to be reading and writing to disk and treating that disk like memory. Now, whenever we're going to page, we always want to do that at the guest level. We never want to do it at the hypervisor level. Very, very, very key point. Because if you do it at the hypervisor level, then you're not just slowing down one VM, you're slowing down the entire server, the entire system. So Hyper-V is smart enough to never allow you to not page from the... I'm going to just fire up a couple more machines. Let's go ahead and fire that one. Let's go ahead and start that one. And I just want to show you that it's going to keep letting me go until I don't have enough memory to run all of the minimum value, the startup RAM for all of my systems. So it will not let me overcommit, but it will let me rearrange memory to run a whole bunch more stuff than I otherwise would have been able to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on from that, and I'm going to pop back to my other system, make sure we didn't miss anything else. So security and networking. Let me do networking also. Let me just show you that real quick. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of networking, and that remember, we're still in Hyper-V, which is number 2, and yes, I'm going to get to the top number 1 thing that I love about Windows Server 2008 R2 in just a moment. We've got about 12 minutes left. I'm going to get there in just a couple. All right, so on your virtual networking, a key thing that I wanted to point out is you have several different types of networks, right? You have, whenever you go into the virtual network manager, you know what, I'm going to just kill one of these machines down here just because it's going to speed me up a little bit. So I'm going to apply this, and that should give me some extra resources to work a little bit quicker. Okay, there we go. So I'm in my virtual network manager. If I do add, I have 3 types. I have an external, I have an internal, and I have a private. I just want to tell you real quickly what the difference between these, but that's not the key thing that I want you to understand. The big thing is, notice my drop down. Now, I'm running on a laptop. Why is my wireless card not here? Well, that sucks. But think about it. How many people have wireless cards in their servers? Right? That's why it wasn't in there. Okay? Logical thought process, but they didn't think about the fact that, in some cases, you do have a wireless card. So in Windows 8, you will see your wireless adapter here. But don't fret, because on my blog, I have step-by-step procedures on how to set up Hyper-V and all your networking to make your laptop your Windows Server 2008 environment. It includes things like setting up your wireless network so that I can go into my virtual machine, and I don't want to do that. So it's just going to turn off that machine. Now, because what you can do is, before I add a new network, I just want to pull up my network settings because I want to show you what's happening under the hood. So the external, because you have the drop-down, you can actually link it to one of your physical cards. The internal does not link to a physical card. But what you can do is you can bridge your internal with your wireless card, and that means bridging basically marries those two connections to make them look like one. And that means you can actually use your wireless on your internal network. Because whenever you create an internal network, it will actually create a new network on the host. So the internal network, you have connectivity to the host. An external, you have connectivity to everything on the physical box in terms of the network. And a private means you can only see other computers, other virtual computers on that private network. So if I go to change adapter settings, you'll see that I have these network connections defined. And I'm going to go ahead and add another internal. And I'm just going to call this MMS test. And I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice what happens in the background is it actually adds a network into my network adapters. Now, what you'll see is what I've done on mine is I have my physical wireless connection, my wireless adapter here. I've got it bridged to another internal network, which gives my virtual machines. This gives my virtual machines. So if I connect my virtual machines to this, then they have internet access. So if I turn on DHCP on that connection, whenever I select that in the drop-down for the NIC, then they'll actually be able to get their IP address from DHCP on the wireless network. So you'll see this is the message, and you see what it's trying to do is it's trying to gain its IP address from DHCP on that network, but it's not going to have success because I have nothing on that network right now. To do the bridging, if you wanted to do that, select your wireless card, select your network that you want to bridge, right-click and add to bridge. It's not available on mine because I already have mine bridged, but if I wanted to add additional networks to the bridge, I could do that. So you see, these are the different machines. These are the different networks that I have bridged on this particular network. It's only this one internal. But if I wanted to connect others to that bridge, I could do that very easily. And I could also just right-click on them and add to bridge. Add to bridge, and it'll add to my existing bridge. Okay? And dynamic memory we talked about. We did that demo. I also have a Hyper-V poster, which goes into a lot more detail on architecture, virtual networking, all that stuff. So some really cool stuff there. And suspense. 7 minutes left. I got to get to number one. The number one thing is private cloud. Windows Server 2008 R2 SP1 is the foundation for private cloud. Okay? That's what makes private cloud possible. And, Windows Server 2008 R2, Hyper-V, System Center, Active Directory, those three pieces really make private cloud possible. And in fact, all of Microsoft's cloud infrastructure is all built on exactly that. So from a private cloud standpoint, you have the capability of running SharePoint server, Link, Exchange, SQL, Dynamics, whatever. It's ready for prime time. For those that are heading out, please do your evaluations. Very, very, very important. So please do those evaluations. And then obviously public cloud. But the key thing is you also have that capability for doing the hybrid. So because you have that foundation, and oh, by the way, I do have a set of blog posts on how to create your own private cloud foundation with step-by-step on my blog. If you go to aka.ms/lab, you'll have a step-by-step instructions on how to set all that up. I'm actually going to be doing video to take you through that entire process, and then I'm going to extend that to also include all the System Center 2012 stuff. So some really, really good stuff out there. Again, my contact information, IT Pro Guru on Twitter, my blog, itproguru.com, and I would also encourage you to go ahead and become a member to join from my blog. That's /join. You'll see it on my blog as well. My blog, I get about last month I got 25,000 unique visitors on it. It's a pretty popular blog because I have a ton of step-by-step how-tos. So I encourage you to go to the step-by-step or go to the how-to tags and see. You can learn a lot of stuff out there. So keep learning, and thank you all very, very much. I'll stick around for questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and step up to the mic. I do have some resources in the deck, and please, please, please do your evaluation. Thanks.